What's up, everyone? I'm Nathan Graham Davis, and I'm going to re-break in as a Hollywood screenwriter. Hey everyone, before we get into this episode, I just got a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this at all, please subscribe and please share it with a friend. My plan is to cap this whole thing off with a live streamed reading of the finished, polished script, and YouTube won't let me do that unless there are at least 1,000 of you subscribing. So if you could just take 2 seconds to hit that little red button, I'd really appreciate it. All right, here we go. This is a huge day. I'm about to write Fade In for the first time in years, at least, in earnest. It's pretty awesome. It's exciting. I've been thinking about this project for like 3 months now. I've been recording these episodes for 2 months, and it's all kind of leading up to this. So now I'm about to start my first draft. So this is probably going to be a long segment and make for a longer episode than normal. So, if this isn't your thing, there'll probably be lots of me just kind of looking at the page and staring at it like this. Go ahead and just skip to the interview. It should be really cool. Have not done it yet, but I'm expecting exciting things. I'm going to be sitting with my friend Ryan Jackson and talking about what makes a great first 10 pages. So if you don't want to see the boring stuff of me writing, go ahead and skip forward right now. The link to the timestamp will be in the show notes below. But otherwise, here we go. So for the last few scripts, I actually have not typed fade in. I've typed breathe in. Why? Because I'm a nerd, and it just seems like the idea of like breathing in before something big is about to happen is kind of fun and cool. And so, I have no idea if anybody else thinks it's cool, but I optioned one script that had that, and then I also, have gotten meetings off of other scripts that have had that. So I see no reason to stop now. Anyway, let's get going. So the very first thing I'm going to do here is super when this fucking movie starts, which is in 1220 Common Era. It is important, by the way, that this is Common Era and not AD, because religiosity and Christianity do play into this movie. And then I'm going to super again to indicate that the 1220 has now disappeared, and it's going to say near modern day Lillehammer. God, I hope I spelled this right. Norway. I might capitalize that differently, like capitalize the M and the D later, but I'm not going to worry about it for now. And then, in the center of the page, I'm going to type the movie name. And it's called Ether, with that sweet AE character. And, I honestly don't know what that's called off the top of my head. I should know, but I don't. So we're just going to leave it as that. All right. And now we can get going. So we are exterior. Let's see. So we're in a mountain forest. So we're going to call it that, sort of. What? Oh, okay. So Scrivener doesn't capitalize that for me? That's stupid. As you can tell, this really is the first time I've done this. Oh, no. I just was doing it wrong. All right. Exterior. Mountain. Side. Forest. Day. And the name of our main character is Scara or Sarah. Actually, it's like in between that. I actually looked up the pronunciation of it, but it's like Scara. I don't know. I suck with accents anyway, so I'm never going to get that right. But that's how it's spelled. Scara. Breath fogs the cold mountain air. Actually, I may not need that word mountain there if it says mountainside forest. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call this Boreal Forest. Okay. Scara's breath fogs the cold mountain air. I'd better learn how to pronounce my main character's name. I'm going to need to practice that. Anyway, so as she climbs. Well, is she climbing right away? Maybe she's pausing. As she pauses amidst dense forest, dense wood, and understory midway. This is really weird to be writing this and having it recorded. I need to just rip the Band-Aid off and get this done as quickly as possible. I don't like that mountain is there and mountainside is there, so I'm going to solve for that later, but right now I'm just not going to be too picky about it. She takes a step. I do that, by the way. I just started to like whisper out what I was writing. I do this all the fucking time, which is why I can't, like, I hate writing in coffee shops or anything like that if I'm anywhere close to anybody else because it's just embarrassing. Especially when I'm writing dialogue. I just can't help but say their words. Ignoring the let's scrape. So I want to describe her now just a little bit. So she's young, very young, probably like 18 to 20. And she is like really skinny. She, first of all, she's a peasant back in the Middle Ages, so they weren't all that well fed, and anyway, at least in terms of nutrition. But she's also been on a journey for a few days, so she's not eating much. So she's going to be kind of like starved skinny, and it should not be in a way that's attractive. Like it should be in a way that is really weathered. I think I like that word weathered, so I'm going to work with that. Um, and something along those lines. And for what it's worth, you see a lot of scripts where they introduce, the main women or any women really, and they talk about their beauty and how attractive they are. And like, let's be honest, like, if we've got some Hollywood actress playing this part, I'm sure she's going to be beautiful. But like, I don't like writing that into my scripts. At least not as a focal point, because I think that's kind of lame. It takes away from, what's important about the character. And, you don't see that with most men in scripts, unless they're, a romantic lead, and then that makes sense. But otherwise, like, you usually see something a little bit more related to like their physicality in a way that relates to the story. So that's what we're going for here. So when I describe things, I like to do it in the middle of action. Like if I can avoid just pausing the read so that in order to tell you something, I try and avoid that, right? So like, I mentioned that she's got bare arms and actually like I could throw in an adjective there. So I could like do like her scrawny bare arms. And so, now you immediately have a better picture of what she looks like, right? And I haven't slowed the read for this point. I can probably, I may not leave this. I don't like throwing in age in parentheses after an apostrophe S for some reason, because it just reads awkwardly in my brain. But it is efficient, so that might stay there. All right, what else? Oh, you know what? I wanted to show that she was carving blazes into the trees on the way up, on the way up the mountain. So I might actually do that before she pushes onward. All right, so So I don't even need working her way up the mountainside, right? And then that solves that annoying problem of having mountain twice in the same paragraph. All right, so Sarah's breath fogs the cold mountain air as she pauses amidst dense wood and understory. She pulls a crude iron knife from her. I'm gonna, you know what, there's been so much research necessary for this. I actually haven't really researched what they would wear. So I assume she's got some kind of scabbard type shit hanging from her, a belt type thing. Um, but I don't know that for sure. So right now, that's what I'm going to write. And then if I have to come back and fix that later, I will. Joe Johnson was saying in an earlier one of these episodes how, Stephen King mentioned that, at some point you just have to write and research later. And although I really like doing a lot of research up front, this is a good time to talk about the fact that like sometimes you just have to get shit down because you can spend way too much time in the weeds, just like I'm doing right now talking about it. So she pulls a crude iron knife from a scabbard at her side. Actually, I'm going to call it an iron knife from a crude scabbard at her side because I think that suggests that she's not some warrior, right? Like she kind of cobbled this shit together and carves a marking into a nearby tree, ablaze. A trailblaze? I'm not sure. I feel like blaze is good enough. Okay. Her face weathered, but not beaten. She takes a step and pushes onward, ignoring the branches that scrape her scrawny bare arms. Actually, I don't think I need the word bare because if they're scraping at her arms, you're probably going to assume that. All right. So, and this is just, I keep on rereading it to make sure that it flows. And this is why, some people don't work this way. Like they'll just like write, and get a draft, and that's awesome. It tends to take me just a little bit longer to write each page because I like to just know that it at least reads okay. Like I know I'm going to come back and fix it later, but I want to at least feel like I'm putting something okay down there. So, exterior boreal forest day. Sarah's 18. Breath fogs the cold mountain air as she pauses amidst dense woods and understory. She pulls an iron knife from a crude scabbard at her side and carves a marking into a nearby tree, ablaze. Her face weathered but not beaten, she takes a step and pushes onward, ignoring the branches that scrape at her scrawny arms. Okay, I think I like that. So let me talk about a couple of the decisions here. So first of all, those supers, I think that's really obvious, right? Like, I want you to know immediately where this is taking place. I mentioned that I'm using Common Era specifically instead of AD because I think that suggests some sort of like pushback against religiosity, at least pervasive religiosity. And that certainly plays into this script. Boreal forest, so opening with her breath, fog in the cold mountain air, right? So like this is called ether, and ether is like that. I think you probably know this, but anyway, I'll explain it. It's like that magical idea that of it's almost like the force, right? It's like, or it's this magical thing that kind of, or it's like the force or dark matter. It sits in between all matter. It sits in between the air. It's the reality behind the reality. And it's something that people believed in for a incredibly long time until I think the 19th century or so. And it was certainly spelled this way in Scandinavia, and I think it looks fucking cool. So that's the name of the script. And I also like how it relates to a lot of the imagery that I wanted for this, right? So like there's going to be a lot to do with breath and wind and air in this. And I'm going to have that factor in throughout the script, just because, again, like I like this theme of ether and something kind of a reality being behind the reality. So we're starting with that for the opening image. And she's climbing up a mountain because, I want to show from the start how tough and determined this girl is, even if she's not really that skilled at this point. She knows what she wants and she's going after it. She's carving trailblaze because a thematic element that came out of me kind of working through this story is that, is the idea of carving your own path. And that's going to play heavily into the whole script. So, we're starting in the opening image with two like pretty strong thematic elements. And I think, it'll be kind of cool too. Also, her name means to cut or to carve in Old Norse. And so I thought it was a cool looking name. Like, it looks feminine to me, but it also looks kind of strong. And again, it plays into the theme. So yeah, I think this is a good place to stop recording. Hopefully that gives you just a little bit of insight in how I think through my process. And I hope you enjoy the conversation with Ryan Jackson. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Doing all right. This is the second time in a row that I've hit record before the interview started. So I feel like I'm playing in the winner's circle, and I feel really good start. So.
It's all good. No worries, man. No worries. You can chop it up. Yeah.
Dude, I definitely like had the pre-election jitters all day long, for sure. I didn't even realize that we had scheduled this for election night until yesterday. But actually, I'm kind of glad to be able to take my mind off it for an hour or whatever. So thank you. But maybe to commemorate election night, in like 10 seconds or less, draw the best comparison you can between this election and screenwriting.
The comparison between this election and screenwriting, no matter what choice you make, you're fucked.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's how my feeling about screenwriting and the U.S. political the U.S. political system right now.
How you doing, dude? What do you got going on right now?
Well,
General.
I've always got something going on. I'm about to go to LA this week to write a movie. We'll see how that goes. I'll be there for a while.
So this one is one with Tyrese, is that right?
Yeah, it's just an idea that he's had, and he's been kind of like mentioning it to me over and over again during the course of us doing other things. Mm-hmm. And like the timing lined up for him, and then he was like, well, what are you doing? And then I looked at my schedule and I was like, this is doable. I can obviously use the money, and it's writing. So I'm like, all right, cool. So that's the next thing I'm doing while I work on this other thing that I showed you part of, and just trying to stay productive, because for me, my true talent, isn't really writing. It's my true talent is procrastination. Like that's what I'm good at. Yeah,
I think that does make you a writer, actually.
Right. So like that's why I'm like really like I have to continuously try and like push myself to not put shit off, because I will be the first person to.
So do you mean like you're like purposely putting yourself under pressure so that you have to do something?
Yes, pretty much. Like if I don't do that, then I have a tendency to let things just kind of go. Like I'll just let it go by. It's a bad habit.
You realize that was like the main, at least one of the absolute main drivers for me doing this whole series.
Oh yeah, I believe it. I totally believe
because it's like an incredibly public deadline, and it's totally working. Like, mm-hmm. I just started Pages on Saturday, and on top of the day job and doing this series, I've got 14 done, and it's like, it's coming together. It's really hard. Like it's hard to find the time for it, but it's coming together, and like it would be very easy to put it off if I didn't have this super public deadline.
Oh, true. I mean, that's a good way. Like I said, it's a good way to put pressure on yourself. You know what I mean? Like when I. That's the motivation for me most times, is like when people start to depend on me to do it, then I have that extra motivation to push through and push through. I mean, I wish I could say that I'm like this determined. Like I know some writers who are like that, like they just seem really like, like everything they have their process, and it's just to the T. It's like I write this amount of this amount of pages for this set time, day in, day out for a series of weeks that gets me to the first draft. That first draft is based on an outline that I meticulously did 2 or 3 months prior, and I should reach the first draft by 2 months and the second draft, but like they have it all mapped out. And just me, like that's never ever ever how I've ever approached writing.
It's
like
dude,
to me,
that's
I
what
look at
I'm
writers
doing
like
now.
that.
What's that?
Yeah. To me, I look at writers like that, like, yo, you guys are like, that's like strange. I'm like, huh? Because I'm like, again, like they always say, I hate that there's people who say there's always two types of people, like, I
Yeah.
hate that saying, but they are really, in the broad sense, there are two types of writers. They're the people who like, you know, are meticulous and they write everything down and plan it. And then there's, there's the people that write by the seat of their pants. And I definitely fall into that like latter category. I just always
Yeah,
have.
dude. I mean, that's how I've done everything in the past for screenwriting. I like for the graphic novel that I did after I kind of get out of it, we had to get it done on a really strict deadline. Because we had raised all this money on Kickstarter, and then we had to kind of get it together by a certain time. And so I kind of meticulously planned that out, and it worked okay, and then I've just kind of kept doing that with other forms of writing since then. And so this is the first time I've ever tried to attack a screenplay in this way. And it honestly would not be this rigorous if it wasn't on YouTube and I had like a whole series of episodes planned out. But it's kind of fun to try something different and just attack it in that way,
Right.
It feels a little insane, but it's cool. But anyway, so you're heading to LA in a couple of days, which is super cool. And this is not the first project that you've done with him before, right?
No. I've done, like I said, it's been about 2 years almost that we've been like in this sort of kind of writer partnership thing. And this is like our fourth, I think, script we've worked on. And that's not including like movies that, he's done, because I have input pretty much on anything
Oh,
he's
on
in.
stuff that's already been produced. Okay.
Yeah. So like, if he's shooting some movie, then he's typically like, hey Ryan, could you like look this over and give me your thoughts on, or he might be like, this dialogue, I don't like saying this, let's go through this together and like let's figure out like, if we can like make this sound more like something that would come out of my mouth, like.
Nice.
So yeah, so like besides working on that type of stuff, actual scripts that we wrote together, yeah, this would be like our fourth. One of them was announced in the trades. It was called what's the name of that script again? I have PTSD about it. I blocked it out of my memory. It was in the trades, and it fell through. It had a start date and everything, and Wonder Film was producing it. It was an experience. But that, and then there's another mashup movie that I really can't say anything about because I'm supposed to keep it on the hush hush. But it's two popular movies mashed together that we wrote together. And like I said, I don't know, since both IPs aren't technically owned, they aren't owned by us, me or him, and they're owned by two different studios. Who knows, ultimately where that'll go, if anywhere. But that was the very last thing we worked on, and like now this new thing. So and there was another like it was like a R&B. It was set in Detroit, in like the world of like R&B singers in the 60s, like that we did. It was like sort of kind of like it was like almost like it was basically a pilot, and yeah, those were the projects that I've worked on, in terms of with Tyrese. But
Dude, so how did you guys like connect? How did you guys connect and get working on it? Had you known him for a long time beforehand, or?
Oh no. We connected through a screenwriter my good friend Mike Lee.
Oh, no
Mike
kidding.
Lee,
Okay.
yeah, Mike Lee had worked for him for years. When he used to have a company, and like him and
I
Mike worked
think
together
I
closely.
remember him talking about that. Was he like a personal assistant for him way back when? Is that right?
No, I think Mike was never his personal assistant. He was like I believe Mike was a personal assistant for like Owen Wilson, I believe.
That's what I was thinking of, because I knew
Yeah,
he
yeah,
had done that for somebody. Like,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So his Tyrese situation was totally different. Like Tyrese had a company and Mike Lee was part of it, and they wrote together. In fact, he credits Mike for being the one to show him how to use Final Draft. He's like, I didn't even know how to use it. Mike Lee was the guy who showed me, like, here's how you
That's
open
cool.
Final Draft. Yeah, yeah. So like that connection was made just on a random, as most things it seems to happen when it comes to me at least, just randomly. Yeah, one day I was back out here, and Mike just hit me and he was like, hey man, would you be interested in working with Tyrese on this project? In fact, the project that he mentioned is the project that I'm going to go work on now. So it's been
Nice.
like, right. So it was that project, but then a totally different thing happened when we actually got on the phone. So like I had gave him my information, contact information for him to give to Tyrese, and then he hit me up that night, and then that phone call went pretty well, and I was on a plane shortly thereafter, and just everything became what it is from that point. Like it was kind of like,
That's rad,
you
man.
know, yeah, yeah. So and I feel like I've had so many weird kind of like experiences like that, and just weird. Again, like my screenwriting career, or if you want to call it a career, is very like random. I'll say that. Like all of the things that have happened. Like when I lived out in LA, um, like it was only for again a couple of years before that. Like it was just unsustainable, but just the randomest, most strangest like happenstance situations. Like oh, like this person read this script of yours, and then this person reached out, and then like it's just like I wish I could say like yeah I had it all planned out.
Yeah, yeah.
No, there's a lot. Yeah, it's just a lot of chance, a lot of like again, like I just kind of feel like
But you're writing stuff that people are excited to read, and that's awesome.
right,
So,
right. But when I give people advice, or when I give people like kind of sort of like like my opinion, it's like very it's very like yo nobody knows anything like we know William Goldman, like nobody just
dude,
like trust me.
but that's right. That's the right advice, though, right? So, like, I mean,
Right.
it's been cool. Like every single one of these,
Mhm.
everybody has kind of said the same thing, right? Like every process is personal, and everybody talks about how hard their career has been, how random it's been at times. Like, and I think that that's such a cool thing for anybody who's kind of taking this game seriously to see, because at least for me, like before I broke in, I had this perception like once I get that manager and once I get that first option, like it is smooth sailing from there. I'm going to get movies produced. I'm going to make
Right.
$1 million a year. Like it's going to be easy, right?
Right.
And it's just not that way for anybody.
Man,
Um,
no, not at all.
and
Yeah.
like, and then the flip side is like sometimes just something really random will happen, and then shit was not moving at all, and then it just takes off. And then obviously as far as the writing process goes, like it's a deeply personal thing. One thing that you just mentioned though that I've never talked to any screenwriter about this before, so I'm actually really interested to hear what you have to say on it, if there's even anything that you can speak to. But you said like you write stuff for Tyrese so it'll sound like his voice.
Hmm.
And I've heard about writers doing that before, but I have never had a conversation with another writer about like doing that for somebody,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
they're actually kind of brought into a project specifically to help it fit an actor's voice. Um,
Hmm.
so like, how did that come about? Was just because like you'd been working together for a while, so he really trusted your judgment? Do you feel like you have a certain ear for that
No.
type of thing, or?
No. Here's the funny thing, right? The funny thing about like me doing any sort of writing partnership whatsoever is like, and I think I was telling you this briefly when we were messaging each other, is like that I'm a very like voicey writer. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying?
for
Like I'm,
sure.
I'm like I'm like voice heavy. So
Yeah, you
like
got all these
typically,
asides and
yeah,
unfilmables. Like every
yeah.
fucking screenwriting guru hates you.
Right, right. I'm very much like the dude that's like, ah, fuck the rules. Like, you know what I mean? Like the rules are made to be broken, or just straight up ignored, like so I'm not the like prototypical like writer with like, because usually you would slot someone, a writer would slot into like a situation like that with who had like no voice, you know what I mean? Who was like sort of kind of like, I sound like everyone, you know what I mean? Just a real like, and so like I think the only reason that like the situation that I'm in with say like Tyrese works is just because me and him have been like, we felt each other out, and like being that he's a celebrity, and being that I'm like some a type of person who like doesn't really care about that, like I'm very jaded, I always say this, like I'm it's an oxymoron, but I'm good jaded. I think there's like bad jaded and then there's good jaded. I'm just very like I'm good jaded, like the things that other people may get like stars in their eyes about, like I don't, because I see that for what it is, like that
Dude,
that got like I got dispelled of any notion of that fairly early, you know what I mean?
this just makes me think of that video that you shared, I don't know, a few months ago, like on TMZ, like
Right.
where
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Tyrese is out front and you're just back there like, I don't want to be on this at all. I'm ready to go.
right,
And like
right, right,
totally.
right. Exactly. And see, like, it's a Bukowski quote that like I like to reference, and like to describe what I'm talking about, which is like he said basically everyone knew like Charles Bukowski was like he was an old man by the time like he was famous. You know what I mean? He had worked at the post office for all these years. He was an alcoholic. Like just a really like downtrodden guy, just writing. On his free time. So by the time that like he got some notoriety and fame, he was like, it's too late. Like it's too late for that to like. I'm already fully formed. You know what I mean? Like, and that like I've seen too much. I've been through too much. So like by the time that like I didn't, first of all, I didn't even realize that I wanted to do screenwriting at first, because um I still got into like, and I still have, well, I still want to direct, and I look at myself as a writer director. Like I've always approached screenwriting with that mindset from the very
Mhm.
beginning, because that's what got me into it. It's just that like the writing aspect was the thing that like I could always just do. So like I had been in this little like it was the audio visual production like 2-year school program thing, and like I was really like doing my own little short film things and just little projects like that, and I was very like focused on the technical aspects of like filmmaking. I was like,
Yep.
like lighting, 3-point lighting, editing, cameras, lenses, all that. I was really into that. And like ultimately, what would happen when I would do these projects with people was we would get ideas, or we would like be like, oh, let's do like the 48-hour film contest or something. So okay, cool. So everyone gets in a room, we start writing, and I always end up being the last one there writing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it was what I could do. Like, it was again, like it's something I always did anyways. So, cause I was the kid, who got the little prizes and reading class. You know what I mean? When I was like, oh, you write a short story and write, like, so I was always able to do that. And I kind of like so my path to writing is just like an organic one, because when
Mhm.
I made this decision to do it, it was like, okay, let me just it was 2009. Actually, I remember it was 2009. I was like, let me stop trying to like, do this filmmaking thing like right now, and let me just try and use specifically focus on screenwriting. Like, let me just do that, because I feel like at the very least, I don't have to I don't have to organize people. I don't have to get a crew. I don't have to, raise money. I don't need anybody to just sit down and write a script, you know? So at that point, that's when things started like, from that point on, that things started happening. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sitting in like a Bel Air estate. I'm in the Cincinnati area. But like from that point, shit just started happening. Like, once I just said I'm gonna write, shit started happening. And like I got a manager shortly thereafter. It wasn't within a couple years. It was maybe 2 years. You know, and just again, like I started to get paid. I started to meet some of the people who I was like, oh, like I remember reading this guy's script when I wanted to, when I was like, oh, I want to do this, and I started let me start like researching. Okay, what is, because I wasn't reading scripts, you know what I mean, until I decided to really try it. So then like I started coming across scripts and people I liked, and like next thing I know, like these guys are people I know. Like these guys are people who I've met personally. You know what I mean? I've went to
Sure, yeah.
birthday parties, I've hung out with, they've got me beers, and it's like, and it was just it just once I decided to write, things just always happen. Like so, like I said before, like the Tyrese call, it's just weird. Like it's almost like I've been cursed. I've been cursed to be
You're
a
gonna make a lot of people mad if you say that.
I've been cursed to be a writer. That's what I mean by like, because I feel like the writer is in my experience is the most taken advantage of person when it comes to the whole process. Like the moment that,
and I think there's
you know
a
what I mean?
general awareness of that too. But
Right, right, right.
but
And I'm
everybody who's
like,
not a writer is also okay with it. So
mhm. And I'm like, I'm always pushing back on that. Like I'm always pushing back on like the idea that like, oh, writers are supposed to be these like shut in, like low functioning nerd people. I'm like, no. I'm not like that. I'm vocal, I'm opinionated. Like
yeah,
I'm not gonna like let you just be like, oh, you're the writer, get the hell out of here. You know what I mean? If anything, like I'm gonna be like, no, like this is, I'm gonna say, because I feel like what
for you do.
I feel like the reason that like not only is everything, there's nothing before the script. Let's be honest. Like
Right.
before, there's no actors, there's no sets, nothing until you got a script. Everything comes from the script stage to be, for one thing. Okay, and another thing is just any writer that, in my opinion, any writer who's worth reading or who writes anything has an opinion. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to read or I don't want to consume art from anyone that just has no opinion. You know what I mean? Like some
Dude,
writers
that's
are
so true. Like absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what I always like to remind people when, because like I have a lot of conversations with writers about just what's when they're going, like everyone does it, like when stuff's not going right, like this person's giving you, like this person's like not paying you, or you've got to listen to these stupid bad notes or whatever. And like I'm always just trying to like tell people like, yo, like sometimes you've got to, as a writer, you've got to stand up for yourself. You know what I mean? You can't always be like so willing to appease all parties involved. Like I get that like this is like a collaborative medium, and this is it takes a whole lot of people working together to get a film made. I understand that, but
Definitely.
but what going back to the whole thing about like any artist, and I use that not to sound pretentious, but I do view what we do as art. You can debate whether it's a high art or it's low art, and but I am of the opinion that you have to have an opinion. You know what I mean? Like you as an artist, I don't care if you paint, I don't care if you sing, I don't care if you make film, whatever your medium is, you have to have something to say. You know what I mean? Like
Dude, yeah, it's so true. And like I think for me, and I bet a lot of writers have experienced this, right? Like so it took me a long time to break in. Like I directed like a bunch of music videos and shit like that early on because I also wanted to be a writer director. And then I decided to just be a writer. And but it was still like probably 3 or 4 years after that when I stopped directing stuff that I broke in. And like I had worked so hard to get to that point that I think there was kind of this like, I'm just happy to be here. You can shit on me all you want, and like
right.
So just I think now like I just I care a lot less about that type of thing. Like I am a collaborator by nature. I like collaborating with people, but also, I want to make something that I feel really proud about. So
Yeah, and I will
like,
say this, this is controversial, okay, whatever. But this is just a pet peeve of mine, you know what I mean? Because again, like this is a pet peeve of mine, but like I see a lot of writers do this, like especially like writers who are like on the verge, or writers who are aspiring to be, like I'll see them like go on Twitter and they'll make tweets about like they'll vague book, even though they're on Twitter, they'll vague book on Twitter like, oh, today I got the best notes from an executive. Oh, these executives are so smart. Oh, this producer told me. Lies. There is no such thing as a good executive note. It's like unicorns. They don't exist. Like it's, and if you hear people saying that, it's writers doing the thing that they're, like I'm trying to play nice. I'm trying to play nice. I'm telling you, if their notes, okay, there may be some
I don't know if I completely agree with that. I would say I've had more bad notes than good notes for sure.
Right.
Like not even a question.
I will say this, and I understand what you're saying, and I'm gonna add to it. I'm gonna say, okay, there may be some executives or producers who do give good notes, but those people are rare, and they exist in a bubble. Like they're like somewhere that like I haven't seen or come across yet. And I would love to meet them, because I'm like, hey, if you give me a good idea, I'm going to take it. You know what I'm saying? But as
there
of
was
yet,
like a creative exec I had worked with who had actually like had a little bit of success as a writer himself. So I felt like he kind of got it,
right.
And I still didn't agree with all of his notes, but
right.
some of them were actually good, like,
See, but
So
if someone's actually a writer, or someone was a writer, like then that makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But a lot of these people, they're not writers. You know what I mean? Let's be honest. A lot of these people don't read.
and they don't know how they don't like know what you're doing,
Right.
They don't know how you do it, but they feel like, and it's kind of like I get the pressure to just feel like they have to have something to say in order to validate their job. But really,
Right.
like, they don't necessarily, like, there's other stuff that they can do to support,
It's kind of like let's say you worked at a hospital and you were like a brain surgeon, and then like the hospital administrator comes down and looks over your shoulder while you're performing brain surgery, and they're like, maybe you should, I think that you shouldn't do, like, wait, hold up, like like I get that, like I get you're a big wig and like you have some like say and like the way stuff runs, but like this is my lane. Like I fix brains. Like that's not what you do. That's kind of how I feel a lot of times when I get like a lot of notes. And it's just, again, maybe
I
that's
get
me.
the thing about the vague like tweeting and shit though, right? Because like that does kind of feel performative.
It's definitely performative. It's definitely performative.
And that's just not necessary. That's not helping anybody.
Right. It's not helping anybody, and especially not helping you like ingratiate yourself with these people. Like they don't care.
If anything, they're losing respect for you by the minute.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk craft some with you, if you don't mind.
Right. Of course.
Because, and especially after reading what you sent me.
Sure.
So I'm writing my first 20 pages right now. And I'm 14 pages into that. By the end of this week, I'll be done with the first act, basically, right? And so wanted to specifically just talk to you about, what makes those early pages great. Like what needs to go into them, how you approach them. I was actually reading Night Games, so that script that you just sent me, and I got to the point right near the end of the first act where the outside gates automatic bolts lock into place, right?
Yeah, right.
And I had this feeling, and I was like, oh, I recognize this feeling. This is the feeling that I get when, like, so for the whole first act up to this point, it's been like I'm on a roller coaster and I'm just riding up and kind of enjoying the view, and there's like the mildest bit of tension, but mostly just kind of like chill. And then you get to the top and those bolts click into place and you're like, oh shit, the fun's about to start, here we go. And I was like, that's what a first act should feel like, like where you just kind of like building up to the oh shit moment, here we go. I thought it worked really, really well. And I had never really thought about it in that way before, but I thought it was kind of a fun analogy for it,
Well, yeah, thank you. I do think that is a good analogy, because I do look at specifically um, genre stuff with that whole idea of it being a roller coaster. You know, peaks and valleys, ups and downs. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, I view, you know, a lot of my stuff has always has humor. You know what I mean? Like, even if I'm doing like serious scenes, like there will be humor sparse throughout, and because that muscle is the same, so it's like setup, punchline is the same. It's the same type of muscle that you do when you write horror. You know what I mean? It's like because you're setting something up. You know what I mean? And then
Totally.
you know, it's like it's almost like how you construct a scare. You know, and I always think about that for sure. So when I'm writing specifically those first few pages, like I'm conscious that I'm like taking people on the ride. You know what I mean? Like I'm aware of it, and I want them to get. I want to convey the tone. You know what I mean? Like I want to convey the tone. That's part of the reason why I am so like loose with the voice. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because the voice is a way to, like, for me at least, my
Absolutely.
voice is a way for me to indicate tone to the reader.
So like your first page of Night Games, right? Was
Mhm.
it takes place in a blizzard, and
Right.
every single action line is one line, and they're
Mhm.
all short. And I don't know if this was intentional. I assume it was, but it looks like a blizzard on the page, right? Like there's so much white space there,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it
That was the
just
point. Yeah.
yeah, and it works really well. And then you know probably a third of those lines are not filmable,
Right.
you know,
Right. Right.
like,
Right. 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 Right.
but
I'm like
but you instantly
I
know what you're getting into.
right. And I heard, I think it was Tony Gilroy once say, like, I don't do everything on the page I do for a reason. And like I've always, ever since hearing him say that, like I've always thought that way. Like it's like, yeah, everything that I'm doing is for a reason. Like, so the way it looks, how I break up the action lines,
Sure.
like whether it's a single action line, or whether it's several, like I'm doing that for a reason.
Yep.
I'm trying to use the medium, you know what I'm saying? Because like people don't view screenwriting as like it's like it's not prose, but it is. It's a different kind of prose. You
Yeah,
know what I
for
mean?
sure.
And
Oh,
like,
100%. The way that you write it controls the feel of the read,
mhm,
absolutely. And it was interesting because so like traditionally you want your first page to not just establish tone, but like really hook somebody into the story, right? And you
mhm,
used a lot of that for stuff that's
mhm.
really not story.
Right,
Um,
right,
so
right, right.
you know, so
Mhm,
talk to me about like what like when you're thinking, okay, this is my first page, my chance to hook somebody.
mhm.
Like how are you approaching that? Because it's a little bit different than what I'm used to seeing.
Yeah. The way I approach it is I already assume that, like, as a screenwriter, that from the before anybody even looks at the title page, that I'm already working like from behind. And what I mean by that is no one really wants to read scripts. Like, and like even the people that do, they're like, here's the script that I got to read. Ugh, you know
Totally.
what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
it's so
you
true.
know what I mean?
Like
And
absolutely.
I'm constantly aware of that. So I'm like thinking like, okay, so like the moment that from the first page, I want them to be like, oh, okay, all right, this isn't so bad. This is actually kind of fun. Okay, I'll continue. Okay, okay, you got me there. What's next? That's what they should be in their mind reading when reading along. And at least for me, the ideal read for me would be someone's reading the script and they're saying, "Oh, okay, what's next? Oh, that's cool. I'll continue." Pushing them forward. You know what I mean? Because again, like I get it. Like I understand. Like I get sent scripts all the time from friends and and peers or whatever, and I'm like, it's hard.
Yeah,
It's just
even when they're
even when
well
this
told
stuff that
stories,
right,
it's just
it's hard.
yeah.
It's
Sometimes it can
it's
be a slog. Like you're trying to do other things, and yeah. So
right, and I'm always hyper aware of that, like the fact that like people's time, like it's like people don't want to read. So like if I can ideally, I would write a script where someone would didn't want to read it and sat down and finished it because they just were like, I don't want to do this. Oh, oh,
totally.
oh. oh, next thing you know, fade out. Like that is the goal. I may not always hit that, but that's the goal. You know what I mean?
So, and I know this is a hard thing to articulate, but how? Like, how do you keep people reading to the next page, to the next scene? Like, because it's obviously conscious on some level. Like, that's your goal. How are you approaching it?
Well, the first barometer that I measure from is me. You know what I mean? Because like I'm the worst reader. Like what I mean by that is like in terms of like the ideal reader that you want, I'm the worst because I'm like looking to bail. Okay, if I'm sitting here, what's going to keep me going? What's going to keep me wanting to read? And then beyond that, I think of things like, okay, like obviously pacing. You know what I mean? Like how is this paced? Is this laborious or not? Like is this like, oh, you know what I mean? Like is this hard to get through? And I look at the page again, how the page is set up. You know what I mean? Because like if you when you pop a script open and you see like just chunks, paragraphs, you're like, oh man.
No, they're like I'm looking for any reason to close that script. Like
exactly.
Absolutely.
I'm conscious of all of those, so I'm always thinking about those things when I'm writing. You know, because I'm like, those things actually make me a slower writer. Like you know what I mean? Like even though like I'll write some scripts and they're like, yo, this script doesn't have this a lot of white space, you know, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of words. And it might ultimately not be when you really, you know, boil it down and do a word count. It's probably not. But trust me, like that's a lot of work. Because I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I don't need that word. I don't need that. You know, I'll just use a fragment. Forget a regular sentence. You know, I'm thinking about all that, like, you know, nerdy writery stuff. You know,
I mean, you're obviously already there, but I bought this book a long time ago. Can you see that? Write Tight.
Write Tight. Yeah.
And it's like, it was really good for that type of thing. Like just, you know, finding strategies to just reduce word count and get the exact same message across.
Yeah. And I always think about like, you know, like I like haikus for that reason. You know what I mean? Like, and I like poetry in general because I'm like, they're always poets, you know, are always like trying to figure out how to say the most with the least words. You know what I mean? Like, how can I convey something using in the most like just economical way? You know what I mean? Like it's so like I appreciate it. Like I'm not some like big like I'm not reading Robert Frost and you know all the time or no shit like that. But like I appreciate you know the medium for that. You know what I mean? Like because it's like that constant awareness of like how can I convey you know as much as just possible like in the least amount of text. Right. And using like the word and the way it looks and like whether you construct the stanza a certain way, like to just convey a feeling or an emotion. Like I'm into all of that. Like I geek out on that stuff all the time. And I feel like it's like, yo, why am I this weird? Like, why do I know this? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. It's very like
dude,
geeky shit.
Something that I noticed about you, I think, and you can tell me if this is the same with all of your scripts, but with the two that you sent me, you could argue that like your inciting incident, catalyst, whatever, is on page 2.
Well,
both of those.
Those are it's funny because those two scripts specifically are very different for a lot of reasons. I wrote Let the Devil Out when I was living in LA, while I was like everything in terms of like around me was imploding. Like, you know what I mean? Like my relationship was imploding. I was working at a startup company and I lost my job there, you know, like I could like my bills were piling up, like everything that could happen in LA that you don't want to have was happening. And I was writing that script. And I wrote that script fully with the intention of not selling it. I wrote that script to give to my manager to send out as a sample and to get me like any kind of meetings. But when I got it done and I gave him a manager, he wouldn't do shit with it. Like he just wouldn't do anything with it. So I was like, fuck, you know what I mean? And I ended up, the funny thing about that and how it ended up on the Bloodlist was I had moved back to Cincinnati. And like, I just sent that script in random, like to the Bloodlist when they were doing like their fresh selects or whatever. And I literally got a call from Kailey Marsh one day when I was walking into this day job I was working. It's actually a third shift job I was working. And like, I got a call from Los Angeles, like, hi, it's Kailey. And I'm like walking in, I'm supposed to clock in. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Like, I got your script, you know, So, and that was like a justification for me, you know what I mean? At that point where I was like, when I was fucked up, you know, and I was telling you to send this script out, and no one did anything with it. Like this, like, see, like it could have done what I needed it to do, which is just, like get my name back in the mix a little bit, and I don't fault my manager. Honestly, like, Brian, like I like Brian, he's still a good dude or whatever. But like, it just, at the time, I just, he was going through his own personal shit too. So, I mean, but I still like think about that, like, well, like, look what happened, like I just needed that, and then the night games is a totally different thing altogether. But that is already that was a script already. So it was a script called like Dakota House, and Scott Milam had the idea, and he had gave it to another writer, and he just didn't, he didn't like the draft, or like he was like, he wanted, he was like, he sent it to me like, hey man, this is something you'd be interested in writing. And I read it. He told me the idea and the pitch for it. And I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, I would be into it. I like it. I like the twist. I like it. So I read the script, and I immediately was like, okay, I see what's wrong with this, and I can do something with this, and so like that beginning part was sort of already there. Like I changed, like if you read the first 3 pages, it's totally different. Like it's in my style, but like it sort of happens. And maybe that's part of the reason why I was attracted to it to begin with, because I do tend to try to put things early, to kick. I like to.
Yeah, I mean, it happens right away. Like,
right. And that's part of the reason why I was like, oh yeah, I can do this, because that's typically what I do anyways. It's I go in, I'm aware that like, yeah, like I try to just get the movie started. You know what I mean? Like I would much rather get it started as soon as possible, because in the past when I first started writing, I would take a long time to get that first act going. You know what I mean? Like it would just be like page 30, like, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, like I believe that like your inciting incident can happen anywhere. Like it can, like, I'm just like, it can happen 80 pages in. And trust me, if you can't tell, like I'm definitely someone who is versed in like structure and like things like you said, like Joseph Campbell, and like you talk about the hero's journey or Save the Cat. Like I've read a lot of these books, like and it wasn't because I wanted to educate myself though. It was different. It was like I need to know these things before I subvert them. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of that stuff is instinctual anyways. You know what I mean? Like we've like as our generation, in the generations that preceded us in terms of like, whether it was the boomers or whatever, like we've been raised on watching television and movies, and like we have a lot of the understanding of how a story's supposed to go. Like it's just through osmosis, you know what I mean? And like for me, for example, like like I said before, I fell into screenwriting organically. If I tell you the first jobs that I've ever worked, it seems like I was on a path. Like, okay, I worked with my father when I was a kid. Like I was like 11 till late into my teens. My father, he used to contract clean movie theaters. And like part of the perks of doing that was I got to see movies for free all the time at both the local theaters in my neighborhood, because he did both of them. And I could go in there. I can go in at night, the night before a movie premiered. So if the movie was going to come out on Friday, they had to screen it before. So if I could come in the day before and watch the movie before it came out, like I could go watch, because they got to screen the print. So like then when I got my first official job, it was at Blockbuster Video. You know what I'm saying?
Dude.
And again,
I worked at a Blockbuster for 3 years. That's totally the reason that I got into this, 100%. I got to shout out Jay Cody, actually, my old manager, because he's probably going to watch this. So
shout out to Jay Cody.
But I'm also going to call him out for shutting off my free rentals when I quit. So
oh yeah. Okay, fuck Jay Cody. No, but like long live Blockbuster too. Like I miss it now that it's gone. But yeah, like so that I say all that to say that like before even like I knew consciously like that I understood like structure and movie, like I had already absorbed enough of it. So like when I came across like these like books, I was like, like I saw like how they were breaking it down, and it just kind of, I was like, okay. And then I saw as like they're trying to make a formula, and you do recognize some of like the formulaic elements in like a lot of movies, and it's like, okay, cool. So I definitely think like, yes, in order to subvert, the rules or expectations, you have to know what those expectations or rules are. So I'm definitely a proponent of like knowing the craft. You know what I mean? I'm not an anti-craft person. I'm very much, I feel like that's a trend too. Like that's a very cool trend to be like, oh dude, I'm anti-craft, man. It's like, oh, whatever. It's like I'm punk, you know what I mean? I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm all for that punk ethos, but like I'm very much, I will tell you at the end, like I'm very much a craft person. Like, like there's something about people that like take their craft, you know what I'm saying? Take the craft seriously. Like
Yeah,
that be,
absolutely.
you know what I'm saying? Like I take it seriously now. Yeah. Am I a perfect writer in terms of like, my habits? No, like my habits are, my habits are crazy. Like
No,
I said,
but
like,
it's the
but
intention that you put into it, right? Like
exactly. It's the
look,
intent.
I mean, how much time did we just spend talking about your first page? Right?
Right.
It's the intention, and it's the idea that you can continue improving your craft, and you can continue making your art better,
Right. I do feel like I'm definitely somebody who is big on like telling people to just throw out what you know. You know what I mean? But I say that like not with the sense of like, yo, just be ignorant. No, 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 no. I'm saying throw out what you know in terms of just, start to look at things through the lens of you. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure when people you probably experience this. Everybody I know who writes experiences this. Once someone knows that you write, you know what I mean? Then they say, "Oh, I've got an idea," or "Oh, I wanted to write," and you're like,
yeah, I like,
it's like, it's
like,
it's one of those things that you just can't avoid. Like it happens all the time, and it will never stop.
And I totally get it, right? Like, I mean,
right.
People do have ideas that they're excited about.
So I get that, but at the same time, when people say to you like, "Oh yeah, I got an idea for something," like that's not what it is. It's ideas. I have ideas all day. Like ideas are the easy part. Like you can like even with your with your series right now that you're doing, like it's like you generated a list of ideas. Now, were any of those ideas you came up with
Yeah, it's like, I mean, actually this is the notepad right here, and there's like 70 movie ideas on it, and
right.
You know what? I mean, there's a reasonable amount that I think you could actually work from.
Right.
But most of them are not something that I am going to ever work.
Right. And the whole thing about it is you can generate those ideas but it's all about first of all, it's all about passion. It's all about the idea that you're the most passionate about, because that's what's important. That idea that sparks something in you that's like, fuck, I want to see that. I want to make that. That's the idea to go with, regardless of what it is. But
yeah, man, I mean, that's everything. And I'm so glad like that I had a couple people push me in the right direction on that, because I was definitely like, all right, I'm going to break back in. I'm going to do it as fast as possible. And I'm going to come up with like a really good commercial idea that's like targeting. And that was not right. Like it was not the way to go. And now I'm having so much fun working on what I'm working on. And it is so hard. Like this, because I'm working on this period piece, like set in 1220 in Norway. And like every action line I'm writing requires research. Every line of dialogue, I have to like, I'm like combining modern English and old English for like readability with authenticity. And then I'm throwing in old Norse words once in a while in order to like really add some authenticity. But it all needs to be readable. You have to understand what it is or it's useless. So it's really challenging, but it's fun as hell. Like it's geeky and I don't know.
Well, like I mean, like when you said that it was the witch's apprentice.
Yeah,
right?
It's like the sorcerer's apprentice meets the witch.
Sorcerer's apprentice meets the witch, or when I think you described it also as whiplash, and I immediately that popped into my head. I immediately was like, oh, okay, yeah, I see that. Like, yeah, he needs to go with that. Like that, like you definitely of the ideas that that's like, definitely the one you needed to be writing, right? Because I was like, okay, yeah, that works. Just everything about it works. It's just weird enough. It's
becoming really evil, but I'm loving it.
But it's a movie that like it's a movie you can see. It's like, and it's a movie that like hasn't really been done. It's familiar, but that hasn't been done. Yeah. And it's like also like it sounds like, oh, like that would be a fun thing to do. So like I feel like you definitely picked it. But I'd say all that to tie back into what I was saying about like being like picking ideas and people saying, I have ideas. It's about the execution of the idea. It's not about the idea. Like that's what's important. Like, and like part of the execution, a big part of the execution depends on your passion a lot of times. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, that's true. Like I can execute on things I'm not passionate about. Yeah, I can, but it's different. it's really different when you're passionate, and you can tell it shows in the writing. You know, it comes across on the page.
Yep.
Where it's like, okay, yeah, this person really is like into this. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, like it's all about, you know, like your own voice. You know what I mean? And again, like beyond just what I was talking about initially with the whole, you know, the actual voice of the writer, like the voiciness and the style, but like just the voice and your point of view. You know what I mean? Like that's what you get paid the big bucks for if you're fortunate enough. You know, like they're paying you for a point of view. You know, there's a reason that, you know, you have to impart those things in your work. If you're not, then you're not doing your job. So like the things that Nate's into should be all throughout Nate's scripts. It doesn't really matter like if it's set, in the medieval times and it involves sorcerers or involves shit. You can have fucking orcs in there or whatever. It's still, there's still got to be elements of you that you put in that.
So it's funny that you say that, because I was just saying to somebody the other day how I was kind of surprised how much of me like was in this, you know,
right.
and how much of a me story this is. Like I didn't really expect that. Like it felt a little outside my wheelhouse when I decided to write this, and it feels like a Nate Davis story, and that's awesome, right? Like that's exactly what you want to happen at the end of the day. So it's kind of cool.
It's almost harder for it to not be a Nate Davis story, even though you think the elements are wildly different than
some of those other ideas, it might not have been, you know?
Right.
So
that's a key thing though. That's why it's about passion. When you're passionate about something, right? As I wave my licorice in front of this camera, when you're passionate about something.
But those look like red vines, not Twizzlers.
They're Twizzlers. Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah,
Twizzlers are definitely the better choice for sure.
It depends on the mood, man. Like red vines are like, you know, it's like, you got like red vines are specific. You got to have red vines for a specific moment. Like they're good in certain settings.
All right. So what's a red vine setting?
Okay,
this
red vine
the
setting.
Most important part of the interview.
If you're at a drive-in, you want red vines. You don't want Twizzlers. Now, if you're at an indoor theater, you want Twizzlers. That's a big difference. So red vines are like more. They're like more retro. They're like more like the setting.
I don't know that I've ever had red vines at a drive-in. So
they taste
next
different.
time we do that, I'm gonna have to make a point.
They taste different at the drive-in. And like I don't smoke cigarettes, but like red vines and cigarettes, they seem to go together. So like if you're a cigarette smoker, which I don't advocate, you know, please pick up a better habit. To anybody out there watching this, like just don't smoke. But you know, if you're gonna be a smoker, go with red vine. Don't go with Twizzlers, because like something about the consistency of a Twizzler in comparison to the consistency of a red vine that just fits. You know, it just fits. It works.
All right, definitely learn something new.
This type of weird specificity is the type of specificity that is needed in screenplays. All this like weird idiosyncratic shit that I'm saying.
So true. 100%.
You know what I mean? Like that's the type of stuff that needs to color, you know, because again, like I feel like writers
all about texture.
Right. But writers, we're supposed to be like weird people. Like we're like, you know what I mean? Like I to a degree, like that type of shit can manifest itself in many different ways. But I do think that like ultimately, if a certain type of mind, you know what I'm saying, it's just gonna be that way, regardless of the packaging. You know what I mean? Like, because when you start to like really like unpack, like if you have a conversation with somebody, you really like, you start to really see like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, this person's like they're one of us. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm always saying that about writers, you know, and probably why like I get into a lot of like back and forth with a lot of people. You know what I'm saying? Like because I'm always like, oh, wait a minute, you're not one of us. Oh, you tricked us. You tricked us. Like, because again, like Hollywood is funny because Hollywood is it's this multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's a magnet for broken people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it's the spotlight shines on you. You know what I mean? So like it brings in all kinds of people. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not just, you're not just getting the creative people, you're getting a lot of insane people, and there's and people who have like legitimate like mental health issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really legitimate. I mean, I don't think that I completely fall outside that zone either. I mean, I was talking about it on I think it was with Clint Jones on like episode 3 of this, how like as a kid, you know, I was bullied a ton for years and years and years, and like that created a major chip on my shoulder where like I just have this need to excel in anything that I do, you know.
Right.
And And so, although writing is something intrinsic to me, and needing to build and create things and create worlds, that is something that's just a core of who I am. I think that combined with that chip on my shoulder is probably part of why I want to do something big like make movies, you know? So,
right. And
I mean,
that for you,
like,
that's a good thing. Like I could say, I will say this, anger, like people say, it's bad fuel, but like you can get far on anger. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you can. Now, ultimately, once you get to the end, you'll find out like you'll come to the ultimate realization that like, like using this is not good for me. You know what I mean? Even if the result got me what I needed.
sure.
And at some point you have to come to terms with that and be like, all right, well, I need to find like healthier ways to fuel my, my creativity or my ambitions.
Sure.
But, when it comes to this business and just like, and again, I don't say like, there's a lot of crazy people, and I don't say that like flippantly or just to like make fun of people. No. I mean that legitimately. Like there are people that like need like, and again, like we always have to be like self-aware enough about who we are as individuals and as people to be like,
Totally.
like to understand where we fall. Like, and like, because a lot of like, it's a slippery slope. Like it's very easy. You can be like on that edge. You could easily drift off and be like off, it's not hard. You know what I mean? It's not hard to just jump, go off the ledge and spiral. And then next thing you know, like you may be somebody who needs, to seek,
Yeah,
help.
I think
You know what I mean?
self-awareness is so critical though, right? Like, how good of a writer can I really be if
Right.
I'm not able to be honest with myself about, who I am and where a lot of, my flaws and all of the things that drive me, and understand those as well as possible. And maybe I didn't need to admit them to fucking YouTube.
right.
Like,
I definitely don't.
But I mean, like, really, like, how good of a writer can I possibly be if I don't understand those things?
Right. So immediately, once I was like, oh, my daughter's about to be born, I went and got a job at a paper mill, and it was like on a swing shift, and I was just like, yo, I've worked every kind of job you can think of. Like I've done it, like from an office setting to a warehouse to like just whatever. Like I've done it all. And like in that process of doing that, like I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the world. I started to develop a sense of class consciousness. Like I learned about being a father. So like all of that shit informs everything that I write now. Like, you know what I mean? Like as before, like anything that I wrote before, and even when I was starting to experience those things in the early onset, before those things really baked in, like I still was sort of kind of like, like really wasn't putting that shit into the stuff I wrote. Like, you know what I mean? Like Fix didn't have none of that shit in there. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
And it's like at the age that I'm at now, everything that I write is informed by all the shit that I've been through. You know what I mean? And that's the difference. Like you can have a natural ability as a writer, but until you have something to say, it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? And like people may think, oh, it's kind of silly. You're just talking about making movies. But for me, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't look at movies like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, if this is something I want to do, like, then it's got to be, you know what I mean? Like,
it does not matter if you're writing genre popcorn, fare.
Right.
It's
because
absolutely.
I view everything like high art, low art, all of it. Like I view it all in the same level. You know what I mean? Like I just art. You know what I mean? Like totally. I know people like to dice it up and the little things. And I recognize the distinctions that are made, but I'm definitely somebody who like I appreciate all forms. Like there's plenty of movies like I'm like, yo, this movie is absolute schlock, but I love it. You know what I mean? And there's this movie is like pretentious art house, like, and I love it too. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's not really for me, it's not, it's all.
Dude, I'm right there with you. I mean, I love like movies that are their sole purpose is just to entertain,
Exactly.
And I love artsy movies and everything in between. But I still think that you can't write a great popcorn flick unless you can tap into those characters on an emotional level, and that requires having something to say.
That's a good point. And that's another thing that like we should touch on, because I am definitely a character over plot guy. Like for me,
Yep.
the characters are the way in. For me, the plot, like I'm like, no, like there's some writers who love the plot, but like I'm not a plot guy. I'm a character guy. Like that's my.
I think that's what held me back for years. Actually, was and I don't know whether I could have learned it as much as I needed to earlier on anyway, but absolutely, you know, I put plot before character for a very, very, very long time. And
that's an easy trap. That's an easy trap to fall into, because they tell you, like, when you first start doing
that's
this,
what they talk about, right? Like,
right. They talk about like, yo, what's the concept? You know, what's the log line, all that. And like, honestly, you know, I was always really good at log lines, like naturally. Like I was just like, because I'm just like, okay, I just would just describe something that I wanted to see, like the elements that was okay, this. Oh, good, that's the log line. But when I went to write that log line, it was totally. I was like, fuck that. I'm going following the characters, because that's the only way I understood how to do it. You know what I mean? I was like, yes, I had the vague idea of what it's supposed to be because of that. Like, but like that's why I don't outline. It's because of that reason. It's because
oh,
when
you don't outline at all, huh?
No, I don't. I hate it. I will
Wow.
outline. The only time I would outline, is if, again, I'm getting paid to, and they require it, because I just don't, because I need to let it breathe. Like when I wrote an outline for the script Devil's Night that I wrote, and like, which was basically a script where a repo man repos a car, and then he finds a girl in the trunk, like when you know, and it's like, oh, there's a she's bound and gagged in the trunk of the car he repoed, and he figures, oh, he repoed the car of a serial killer, and the serial killer is like chasing him through the whole film. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's concept, but I fucking outlined it, and it was stale. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the first act was working, but because I was going down the outline, boom, 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 it was just, if I would have wrote that like just the way I write now, it would have been a totally different script. Because instead of like following the story, I was writing to the beats. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've never done well
Yeah.
writing to a, like, I mean,
You have
I
to let it.
outline extensively every single time, but extensively for me means like, so for instance, for Ether, which is this script, the outline's 7 pages long. You know, it's not super long, and it's got a, you know, paragraph for each scene in the movie, except for something. There's like there's a sequence in the beginning of Act 2, which is like, I know approximately what that sequence is going to be, and so just kind of wrote that, like approximately what it'll be. But like, I don't need to know every single beat. I'm going to discover a lot of that along the way, and I already have discovered all of these things that didn't exist in the outline, that adds so much texture and depth to the story just by writing the pages, you know. But I do like to have something organized.
Yeah, and I look at it.
Me,
like,
it's all personal,
right? But it's whatever gets you there. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's why I tell people all the time. I'm like, yo, at the end of the day, whatever gets you to a finished script, work. That's what you do. It's not going to be the same for everybody else. You know what I mean? Like at the end, like if it results in a finished script, great. You know what I mean? That's all that you really need to worry about. What gets you to the end? You know, for some people, they need an outline. For some people, they need just a sparse outline. You know, some people need a beat sheet. Some people, like me, that just don't want to, I don't outline. You know what I mean? But ultimately, you know, like, it's a personal thing. Like you said, it's just a personal thing. You know, we're going to have not to cut you off, but I am curious, because knowing what I know about Ether, it's going to be 2 women, right?
Yeah.
And it's mostly just them, right?
Yeah, almost. I mean, there are 2 men as well, but they don't. I mean, they're very much secondary characters.
So see, that's the thing that I'm doing right now. So the thing that I'm doing right now, the whole Night Games thing, right? Which when Scott hit me up about it, he was like, "Yo, what are you gonna do?" Because I wrote that a long time ago, that first like bunch, and I literally stopped, and then he hit me back up recently about it, and I was like, "All right, let's just do this. Let's finish this." So like I started reworking it, and I went back and I literally wrote all the way past where I started. I rewrote some of the stuff that I had already had, but that this script is going to be mostly just women. Like, yes, there's a man in it, the script, but it's mostly women. So I'm hyper conscious of the voice specifically, not my voice meshing with the voices of the characters,
Sure,
being the women.
So
you know what I'm saying? So like that is something like where like as a writer, as a man, you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like you can write anybody, but I'm definitely like I find it fun and a challenge to try and write all women and make it seem like
I'm enjoying
women.
it too, and
Yeah,
it
you know
is
what I mean?
challenging because because I want to be conscious of that, right? It's just like, look, if I'm going to write a black dude, like I'm going to want to be really conscious about that because I do not have that experience, right? Like,
right.
and it's important that I'm trying to, like, if I'm going to write that, like I need to honor it as well as I possibly can.
Right.
And
Because
so,
trust me, I've seen so many I've seen so many movies where you're like, okay, like this person is writing all these black characters, and it's like clearly this is written by like a British guy. It's like, you know what I mean? Like it's not
so,
like, you know.
and actually, this script, which I didn't expect, I had no idea this is where it was going to go because when I had the idea, it was going to be two men, and like since I'm writing it in 1220, and like, I mean, women were just treated horribly then, right? Like, I mean,
Right. Yeah.
like, and I mean, you think it's a misogynistic culture now? I mean, back then, holy
Right.
shit.
Right. It's a different level.
And so like it's becoming a female empowerment story in some ways, which was not what I expected. And so it's really interesting to write. And like I said, it still feels like a story that's like a Nate Davis story. So it's interesting. Well, dude, we've been talking for a long time.
Right.
It's been awesome though. So
yeah,
no,
man,
it's been great. Thank you for your time. Thanks so
no
much
problem,
for
man.
digging into craft and everything that goes along with it.
You too, man. We'll find out what happens in this election. Hopefully.
Yes, we will.
All right, man.
Later.
Good night.
That was such a fun conversation. It also lasted like 3 hours, which meant that it was a bear to edit. Probably didn't help that it was election night. I'm sure that we were both grateful for that distraction. On that note, super cool that it feels like the country is taking a step forward instead of several steps back. Lots of work to do, but I'm grateful for any semblance of progress that we can make, and it feels like we're at least moving in that direction. Anyway, hope you got something out of this whole thing. I know that I definitely did. I loved Ryan's thoughts on voice and point of view and how a writer needs to be able to have an opinion and have something to say. Thought everything about all the intention that he puts into every single word on every single page was really inspiring. And also love the idea of just thinking of the first act of a script as kind of the lift hill of a roller coaster. Like you give the audience something to look at on the way up and just you start increasing that tension, and then you get to the top and you just pause for that split second and then drop the floor out from underneath them. To me, that's something that just, I don't know, it's a visual that makes so much sense to me, especially for any sort of genre type script. So something that I'm definitely going to keep in mind for the future. To give you an idea of where I'm at, I'm in week 9, which means that I finished the first act of my script, and honestly, I really like it. It's obviously not perfect. It's first draft of the first act, but it's coming together, and I'm stoked on what's there so far. In full transparency, it's also really hard. It's really hard to keep up with these pages and to keep up with re-entry and to keep up with my day job and my family, and also my fitness, which is hugely important to me, has taken a complete backseat for the last couple weeks. I just haven't had the time. To add to that whole crunch, I also just did a polish on my script, The Continuum. I had connected with an old acquaintance, and as we were talking, he's a super successful, really great writer. He offered to send The Continuum to a couple agents. And, I told him that I'm specifically not looking for referrals right now, but his reply to that was that this business is all about relationships and he was happy to do it. And so, what am I going to say? No. So obviously I took him up on that and was very grateful for that generous offer of his. He also gave me a killer note without having ever read the script. So just to be clear, he's read other work of mine and had enough faith in my ability, and he just wanted me to send him whatever script I thought was best. And that is The Continuum. And so he asked me how long it was, and I told him 84 pages. It's a really fast-paced, contained thriller with basically 2 characters. And so he asked me if I could get it to 90 without padding it. And, I'm thinking, no, because how am I going to get it to 90 pages without adding some extraneous subplot or character? So I basically told him that. And what he said in response was, here's what you do. So you find 3 or 4 moments in the script where the characters have just experienced something really big. And you give those characters time to think. You give the actor time to work and something to work with. And you give the audience time to breathe and catch up on, the emotional weight of what is happening in the story. And he said it can be as simple as your character grabs a deck of cards and plays solitaire, and then somehow that leads into the next beats of the story. And so, I said I'd try. I mean, he's probably the most successful writer that I know, so I'd be stupid not to at least try that. So I did. And it turned out to be a killer note. It made the whole script better. And again, The Continuum is my favorite script of mine. Like, I was really proud of it already, and I'm telling you, it's a stronger script now. And also, The Continuum is now 90 pages. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you because it was a super cool and helpful note, and it added a ton of depth to my characters and to my story, and I know that I will be looking for opportunities to do that in every script going forward. So, some good news as far as time management is concerned. I think that I am in the most challenging weeks of this whole thing right now. It's taken me like an hour to write every single page, which is just a lot slower than my normal pace. When I planned for this whole thing, I had not accounted for that. I assumed that I'd be writing something that was not set 800 years ago in a foreign country. So I thought I'd be doing a lot less research. The good news is that in 3 or 4 weeks, I will be done with my first draft, and then I'll have a couple weeks off to just kind of catch my breath. And then I think the rewrites will be easier because I'll have done most of that research at that point. So anyway, for those of you doing this with me, here are the action steps for week 9. Number 1, read a script. Read something written by a pro and focus specifically on how they set up that first act. Number 2, write your first act, or at least write 20 to 25 pages if your first act winds up being a little bit longer than that. But we've got 5 weeks to write this whole first draft, so you're going to need to knock out 20 to 25 pages every week if you want to get it done on time. So that's it. That's all it's going to be for the next few weeks. Yes, you should definitely be watching movies and reading books and consuming art of all types and listening to screenwriting podcasts, but your intention should be going into these pages because we are going to be writing a first draft over 5 weeks, and that's a lot of work. I want to congratulate Johnny O'Sullivan and Jake Hulse. I'm sending a copy of Malice and Mistletoe your way, signed by Jack Purcell and by myself. If you want to win a copy of that, just comment below the best piece of writing advice that you've ever received. I'll pick one of you and send a copy of Malice and Mistletoe your way. Next week, I have coming on Erica Schreiber and Hannah Rosner, who are 2 of the 3 brilliant minds behind the Untitled Female-Driven podcast, which is a super cool, brand new podcast that you absolutely need to check out. It's run by 3 pro writers, all women, and just has a really interesting perspective on screenwriting and the industry as a whole. So definitely check that out. They actually don't know it yet, but I'm also going to be asking them about writing women characters. I think it'll be interesting to pick their brains on maybe some of the traps that men fall into when writing women, how they feel that women could be portrayed more authentically on screen. And I'm really interested to see what they have to say about that. So make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss it. And on that note, smash cut to black.